no. Sorry, might be. Three laps. You got a 3 lap in the bag?
Yeah, man.
3 lap in the bag. 3 laps. You're going to eat cookies. Yes, that's right. First, you're going to butcher them with tools. And then you're going to eat the pile of crumbs that remain.
Awesome.
So for the cookie mining lab, the pre-lab is almost the entire paper. You'll need listen carefully, it's also on the board, materials, procedure, the data table on the back, and the pre-lab questions. Materials, procedure, data table on the back, and the pre-lab questions. Everything but the post-lab is due Tuesday next week. You can trim down the pre-lab more than you might think. It's not actually as imposing as it might look. Okay, now 10.1. Make sure that you've circled that silver stamp so that the aides can see it more easily. I'm sorry about that bad choice of colors. And are there any vocab questions? That's good. The first thing I want to talk to you about is reclamation. So I think everybody can tell that's a mine on the screen. And everybody can tell that's also a mine. The first was coal, the second is probably gold. But that's also a mine, and so is that. The last two have been reclaimed. Reclamation is sort of like restoration. You rebuild the subsoil, then the soil, and then you at least launch some ecological activity. It's to recover areas that have been impacted by human activity. There's a lot of controversy about whether something is ecologically functional. So you can imagine, if you just made a gajillion dollars mining gold, you don't want to give up all that profit in reclamation. This comes at the tail end of a mining operation. So I don't know how much you guys understand about mining. First, you have to raise money from investors. You buy the land, you hire the people, you put up the fences, you do all the preliminary geology, all the preliminary road building, and power poles, and bathrooms, and housing, all this money up front. Then you start digging the hole, and that costs money, and that costs money, and that costs money, and that costs money, until you start hitting something you can sell. Before you get $1 out of the ground, you've probably invested millions and millions, in some cases, I'm not exaggerating, billions with a B. So it's all the expense up front. Then you start to get some money, Oh my God, we've broken even. Oh my God, we're finally profiting. And now we're out of gold or diamonds or whatever. And the last step in the mining timeline is to take some of your revenue, now that you've finally made money after 20 years of work, and you're supposed to funnel that back into a reclamation project, which will be very expensive, often eating up all of that profit. So you can imagine for the miner, that's not really an appealing prospect. You want to keep whatever profit you made. You don't want to put that money back into reclamation.
Like from an ecological standpoint, all you did, if all the money from the mine just goes back into reclaiming it, it's like, okay, you messed all this up and now it's just something different.
Yeah, and by the way, ecologically, you can imagine why there's a lot of bickering. For a scientist, that is not ecologically functional. Can you put your phone away, Anna? I tried to do that quietly, but you ignored my first attempt, so this is arguably not a very viable ecological site. And so like Ryan says, it's not really appealing from the ecological point of view. It's also not really appealing from the business point of view. A lot of businesses have actually figured out a really cool trick for this. They will design their budget to self-destruct at the last moment, right before reclamation. So we had enough money to pay back our investors, we had enough money to pay our employees, we had enough money to operate at a profit so that everybody got a bonus, but then, I'm sorry, we're out of money, we have to declare bankruptcy before reclamation. And coincidentally, we'll be starting a new business with all of our same business partners tomorrow. There was one really famous guy who was the CFO of a string of mines that were all profitable, that all made money for the investors, and all went bankrupt right before reclamation. It's a really good formula, you can imagine. It's a really good way to get out of this. Is to spend all your profit early. So when you get to that point where you have a legal obligation, you can say, I'm sorry, the mining business is really dicey, we can't afford reclamation. You know, to be honest and to be fair, I am sure that some mining businesses are really marginal, that they're not very successful. This is truly risky business, and I'm sure well-intentioned, honest people have gone bankrupt, but you can understand how that's a good way to manipulate the deal. So you can imagine, you got to cover up the bedrock. You have to grade the soil. You have to plant the seeds, and in many cases, you have to actually do a full-on habitat restoration with all the diversity. And you can call it good when it's either ecologically useful or, in some cases, socially useful. Anybody recognize this site?
Ewing's Park.
Yeah, this is Ewing's Park. I actually live, I'll show you, what's this? So this is Ewing's. This is where they launched the hang gliders. This is where the downhill trail is. That comes back that way. For the downhill section. These are the 3 baseball/softball diamonds, the 2 soccer fields, the dirt track. This is the wedding lawn. And coincidentally, if you take that path past my friend Dave's house, that's my house. Right there.
Where did you say that?
Yes. What?
Where did you say the downhill was? It's kind of closer to that road, so you can park it right off the.
There's 2 different things.
Oh, there's 2.
Right. So you're thinking the dirt track would be a next track?
Oh no, I'm thinking of the downhill with the little jumps at the bottom, with like the dual slalom.
Yeah, with the jumps and stuff is on the other side of the way.
Yeah, it's like you see that small road coming off of the road that runs along the beach.
Sorry.
Yeah, so coming up from the front.
Yeah, there's a downhill track right there. See?
Oh, right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's like the one that has the jumps in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like that.
Yeah. I know what you mean. So this was, anybody know what this used to be?
Garbage site, right?
Yeah, it used to be a dump. This was the site of Santa Barbara's main municipal dump through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I think.
Really?
Anybody want to correct me on those dates?
No idea.
The 30s to 50s, I think. I'm happy to be wrong about that. 40s to 60s, maybe. I don't know.
So is there like a ton of trash down there?
So yeah, there's more than a ton. There's a whole city's multiple decades of trash. What are now the athletic fields used to be a really deep canyon. That water used to spill from the backside of this and the front side of this down this canyon. But there used to be a bridge. I think there still is actually a bridge buried underneath the dirt somewhere. That used to go into the Arroyo Burro Creek and out to the pit. Then they started putting garbage on this, and they would scrape off dirt from either the north side or the south side of the canyon to make like a layer cake of dirt and trash. And then they eventually just graded that, put dirt and grass on top, and those are another fields. Coincidentally, we will discuss in this class current legislation about how you're supposed to have a landfill But back in the day, they didn't have those laws about how to run landfills. So I would strongly recommend that you never smoke on those athletic fields. Just saying. Because people have measured methane concentrations that are big enough to ignite. Like you drop a lit match or a cigarette butt and it would actually make like a giant flame ball of death. Not to my knowledge, but you know, there's really simple tests for methane concentration, you can imagine. And there's a point at which methane won't ignite. You know, it's not. Most landfills keep methane at relatively diffused, but I think it's probably going to be a few days after a big rain. You get a lot of infiltration, anaerobic digestion from the bacteria that get livelied up to the water, and then they start to fart out like pretty concentrated volumes of methane. They're well above what's considered to be the lower explosive levels. Easily ignitable. Kind of gnarly. Yeah. All right. So if you like to do your stars early, I can tell you right now that number 11 will be on the AP test. It's always on the AP test. They ask every year. And some of you know your homework. So some of you already have the composition of the Earth's crust. Yeah, oxide. You know, it's all bonded. Not an atom of gases. Yeah. So the Earth's crust is made mostly of minerals that form rock. And I think you've probably received these numbers already from your book.
Yeah.
Remember that the Earth's crust is a really thin, fine skin on the Earth as a whole. Almost the entire planet is liquid or semi-liquid magma. Technically, the Earth's core is mostly solid because, I don't know what. And by the way, there's new evidence that inside the solid core is a wobbly lump of liquid. So the current guesstimate is that the inside of the core is a liquid, and I believe it spins in the opposite direction to the rest of the Earth, by the way, but I don't know why that is. Somebody else.
So weird.
Yeah. And then the outside shell of the core is solid. Then most of the magma is liquid. The outer layers of magma are kind of in between. They're like cookie dough with lumps of chocolate chips and solids mixed in. And then floating on the outside of the outer magma is this very thin skin of solid crust. Put it in perspective, if the Earth were a basketball, the Earth's crust is about half the thickness of the basketball's leather. In other words, it's not very much solid. The crust is a few miles thick, usually at the most. So there you have an approximate composition of the crust. I'm guessing you already got this out of your homework. Wait, hold on a second. Hey kids, are you imagining this here? Do you think that this is where it should stay? Where do you get this trash? Standard tooth? I'm sure he'd like to have it back. Just one kid. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe just a public sandwich, but it's all good. You know, it's a premium sandwich. It's all okay. It's all good. I really appreciate that. So the Earth's crust is roughly 45% oxygen, 27 silicon, about 8 aluminum, 6 iron, and about 5 calcium. That's a little different from the numbers on this because there's a little bit of debate about just where you stop calling it crust and where you